in terms of what we have given as overall limits under which we are going to make our policy specifically with regards to the budget. So from that perspective, it's very important to discuss, to understand that what type of policy handles are available to us, what kind of issues we are living in. Because as an economist, we all know that uh, putting taxes is something which is in response to the government services which needs to be delivered. So it's always a kind of a mixed bag in which the government expenditures are always done if you are able to recover it through the taxes. This is what the fiscal policy is about. And this is what we actually teach in our classes as well, that in an economy where the individuals actually cannot take the shocks which are happening to the economy, which we call the cycles of the economy, it's going to be the job of the fiscal policy basically to absorb all types of shocks. And when the things get better, then they have to recover that additional spending which they have done for which they have borrowed. But unfortunately, in case of Pakistan, that good time has never come. We had been borrowing because we had been running budget deficits. And now the situation is that even to repay our interest cost, almost all of our taxes has to be consumed. I'm not saying that it's just because of the fiscal sides, over expenditures. It had to do something with the debt management as well. And I would really recommend Dr. Ghulam Ghouse to please also do a session with somebody who's an expert in debt management, because often that side is very much neglected. But to say that this is something which we are now living with, that we have to face not just an additional burden in terms of expenditures, but on the other hand, the taxes are not coping up. So we are in a situation of dilemma in which the taxes are not there and we have to persistently borrow. This is what we also call as the Ponzi game condition in terms of economics. So just let me share my slides so that my
I am going
structure
to
of
make you
discussion.
co-host.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Yes, sir. Now you are the host of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I'll quickly go through in terms of what I've just put up.
Assalamualaikum.
जी, वालेकुम सलाम.
Sir, am I audible?
जी जी, you're
Yes,
audible.
yes,
You're
please.
audible.
सर मैंने कहना था कि लास्ट जो 28 मई को सेशन हुआ था उसकी पीपीटी शेयर कर दें ग्रुप
Okay,
में
okay,
काइंडली.
okay. We will
थैंक यू
share
सर.
it. We will share with
ओके
you,
सर,
please.
थैंक यू सो
Please.
मच.
Okay. So is my slides visible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It
यस
is
सर.
visible.
Okay. So when we talk about taxes at PIDE, we generally just don't talk about the revenue collection, but we also try to bridge it with the missing element in the policy, which is basically the growth. Because unfortunately, if we only keep on trying to say that we are trying to stabilize by having a budget deficit, which is manageable, then we would not be able to recover from the problems, perennial problems we are into. So what we actually work and still deliberate on in terms of PIDE's work is that how we can reform our tax regime in terms of achieving the growth nexus as well, because otherwise we would keep on doing that. In order to do that, the first thing which we have to understand is that taxation actually is doing something which we also called as the gluten or the burden towards economic transactions. And as a student of economics, we all know the concept of deadweight loss or the opportunity cost which is missed because of additional compliance requirements which the businesses have to do. So I'll just briefly go through that what kind of glitches are there in the system. Then we talk about the FBR and the overall regulatory framework it has, and some of our exercises or analysis which we have done at a very basic level, just to understand that where are the loopholes and how we can actually come out of that. So when we talk about the regulatory burden coming from the tax administration, primarily it is about the paperwork reporting and documentation. And I'll give you some evidence towards that as well, that why actually it is choking the business. But just to quickly talk about it, I'll give my personal example. I am a tax filer, but unfortunately I'm unable to do it myself. And you might ask that I call myself as a fiscal expert, but I'm unable to do it. The prime reason is that the tax return which I have to file is almost 80 pages long, and within one page there are almost 200 purely technical law based compliances which I have to do. So I really fail to understand that what are the crux and how we can manage it. I understand most of the things, but in order to be very compliant with it, I had to take some help. So think about a person who's not that much educated, he's not that much tech savvy. Once he is put in terms of burden to file that return, then how would he be or she be able to do that? And that's one reason. The second reason is that often when we talk about the regulatory burden, what we ask the FBR now and then is that all the data which you're getting, how is it helping the policy? Can you tell us that if you have collected all that information, which you think is very necessary, that has led us to more revenue on the other side? So that kind of database policy is not there. And that is what I would also suggest Dr. Ghulam Ghouse to focus on, that we need to sort of build in a kind of data analytics in terms of the future way of doing the fiscal policy, especially the taxation side, because we are getting lots and lots of information, millions of observations on real time, but unfortunately, there is no data analytics happening in the FPR. So from all that perspective, what we are ending up with is that the businesses are actually too much pressurized in terms of following something which is not their core business. So what they would like to do is that they would simply opt to remain informal. And that's not just about business. We know that there is a term called as filer and non-filer. So practically the government also knows that there are persons who cannot become filer, not because they don't want to, but they can't because the system is too complex. And that is something which we have to think about. And especially when we talk about the entrepreneurs, the startups where we want to have some new innovation, some new businesses going on, that is totally impossible given the regime in which we are right now. And why is it so important to discuss it now? And you have picked the very right time, because we are in that phase now where the budget is going to be presented, I think, around 10th of June. And we are going to have discussions, we are going to have some debate on it, which is going to be reflected into some kinds of adjustment, which, if possible, would lead to some improvement in terms of how the budget is going to be presented. So you have picked the right time. Now, in order to go further, what we have to understand is that it's not a single authority, it's not a single piece of law which is governing the current taxation system. Ideally, there are canons of taxation which starts off with that the simplicity or the ease of collection should be there. And the ease of collection means that it's on the both sides, the ones which are paying and the ones which are collecting. It's not just about the FBR where they think that this is easy for us to put tax, but it also has to be easy on the other side, which are paying the taxes. So if you just run through the overall tax structure which we are right now in, is that it's not just the FBR, we have provincial tax authorities as well, in which they have many types of taxation structures which one has to abide with, which one has to understand, and they have to comply with many returns and other things. And it's not just about the direct taxes or the indirect taxes. There are property taxes, there are excise taxes, and there are lots of other fees which the businesses have to put up with. So what do we end up with? We end up with a crux in which the businesses are not able to perform their main core because they are too much stuck up into this. For this, we just simply compare it across the region, because these are our competitors which are similar in nature but also competing with us. So if you look around, we are not good, because even the Bangladesh side is much better than us. Sri Lanka, India, China, Bhutan. Only Nepal in our region is doing bad in terms of ease of paying taxes. And when we call it as the ease of paying taxes, just think about that the businesses want to pay taxes, but the FBR has made system so much complex that it is actually putting pressure in terms of how to pay. And if you go in terms of detail, you would further basically find out that who's actual beneficiary of this type of taxation. So this is basically the data, which is not similar in terms of the panel time series, but since that was the only available data, just focus on Pakistan. Then if you look at the senior management's time spent on dealing with the requirements of the government regulation, that's very minimal. But if you go on the last columns, then you would find out that they are the ones which are saying that the taxation system is something which is a major constraint. So now we understand that even though the businesses are not finding it difficult in terms of time management, but it is a constraint. So that means the system is complex and there is humans involved which are creating their rents. Whereas in the other sides, if you look at the comparable countries, Bangladesh, China, maybe they want more time, but they do not say that the taxation is something which is a business harming kind of anything. And for that, there is another evidence. If you look at the tax administration data, which is collected by a third party, which is a funded project, again, this is not comparable by years. For the Brazilian case, it is 2018, and for Pakistan, it is 2021. But if you just look at these graphs and see that in the Brazilian case, most of the good indicators for tax administration are in A category, and very few are in D, and some are in C and similar wise. But if you look at the Pakistan's flower, then you would find out that most of the concentration is at the D level or at the C level, and some at the B, and very few at the A. So just think about a tax administration which is actually pulling you back. So the businesses actually feel that they are not just paying taxes, but they're dragged below. So they can't do what they want to do. And similar kinds of information is also presented in other literature. If you compare across the world, then you would find out that it's not just about the taxes, but also what type of taxes they are collected. And you would find out that the Pakistani score is much worse as compared to the other, because we have to do more payments as compared to what the other countries are doing. And similarly, the time to comply and the paying taxes score is not also good. Why is it happening? Just think of yourself as a business, and you might say that from outside that it's just the income tax, but practically it's not the case, because the businesses has to face the taxes which pertain to the manufacturing, right away starting from the sales tax on imports and going up to the sales tax on your sellings, the input taxes and others. At the same time, they also have to withhold taxes besides paying the income taxes. And lastly, they have to also comply with provincial taxes. So on an average, if you think about a business, how many taxes they have to pay, it is more than 17 taxes which they have to comply with in order to say that we are tax compliant. And what does that mean? On the documentation side or the compliance side, if you simply take the sales tax, then they have to file the return almost 13 times a year. And the withholding taxes, and remember, withholding taxes are not the taxes which are directly payable by the business. This is the job of the FBR, which the businesses are actually doing. Even for that, they have to file the return 4 times a year. So overall, if you just think about the income side and the sales side, then it is close to 13 returns per year. And there are 5 returns which they have to bear in terms of the advanced taxes. And if they are doing business all across the provinces, although the FBR says they have harmonized, but still they have to file the return in every province. The system has only been combined. So that means there is still difference in terms of taxation. So that means that if they're doing businesses Punjab, then they have to comply with a different rate. If it is done in KPK, then it is different. So even though the platform is the same, but the compliance is 61 times a year. So just imagine a business has to comply with in terms of documentation, in terms of telling the FBR what was the tax liability and how much the businesses have actually paid. They have also, it's actually a report done for the small and medium enterprises, in which they have calculated the total cost which they have approximated the cost which the SMEs has to bear in order to comply with the taxes. Just look at the scenario 1, which is close to 736,400 rupees. So just imagine a small business has to bear a cost of paying taxes on top of the actual tax, which is close to 736,000 per year. We have also calculated in PIDE the cost which the individuals as a business has to pay, even if they have not registered themselves as a manufacturing concern, and that was close to 300,000 per year. So a business which is doing business at a very small scale, if they want to comply with the tax side, then on individual side, they have to pay almost 300,000 per year. And if they are business, then they have to bear almost 1 million rupees cost per annum. If you are a big business, then that's fine, because that's a very small cost. But if it is a small business, then it's very difficult. So what does that results into? So that results into the businesses remaining small. So this is basically data which was taken by the SECP in terms of who's actually paying taxes in terms of registered firms. So they found out that only the small scale firms whose paid up capital was not more than 50 million. 5 crore से ज्यादा नहीं था. in which they were actually paying taxes in terms of the highest number, and the rest of the bigger ones were not paying, or they were not registered because they were having a fear that they have to pay the taxes. So what does this mean? So that means that on one side, the taxation rate is high, but on the other side, the documentation and the way the taxes has been collected is actually crippling the businesses. And one of the features for this crippling system is the withholding taxes, in which the businesses are actually forced to collect taxes on behalf of the FPR. So there are almost 90 odd withholding lines which the businesses has to bear when they are paying taxes. For example, if I am paying amount of more than 100,000 to one of my suppliers, I have to withhold the income tax. If I'm buying something from the market, if I'm making payment, then it's my responsibility to withhold the taxes. The problem with that is that this is not my job. What was the actual liability, how the documentation should be done, that's on the part of the business which I'm dealing with. But the FBR has actually put me on front because they think that we can do that job better without any recourse, without any benefit to the ones which are collecting it. And on top of that, when we did a small analysis in terms of looking into what is the contribution. So if you look, we did it back in 2022, in which out of 88 lines, the total collections 1%, less than 1%, which was close to 1.2 billion, was collected by 45 withholding lines. So 45 types of withholding lines for which the businesses have to do compliance, the documentation, and others is just giving them 1.2 billion rupees. So that is something which necessitated that it should be taken away simply. On the sales tax side, there were problems which were further exacerbated. On the withholding side, we found out that only 45 withholding line was paying less than 1%. The problem actually grew when we talked about the sales tax. When we did the analysis, out of 989 products, almost 714 products was paying less than 1% of the total collection. So just imagine the FBR saying that we have put so many taxes, everybody is paying taxes. But if you go into the details, then most of the products are actually paying peanuts because it's very difficult, or they want to remain small. On the same side, if you look at the sensitivity of the collection, then almost 5 or 6 products or areas were actually contributing the most revenue. It was oil refineries, it was electrical energy, it was oil exploration, and some kind of an oil marketing company. So if the oil was taken out, then your whole sales tax at the domestic side is going to collapse. For some reason, let's say if there is a problem such as COVID in which the oil is not being used, or there are problems in terms of oil imports, then your sales tax domestic is going to collapse. The similar position also holds when we talk about sales tax on imports. And this should also should alarm you, because we are collecting sales tax at import side. So that means that when the product actually lands, even if it is not used in some business product, we collect the sales tax at that point as well. And in that also, the major chunk was coming from mineral and fuels, then it was iron and steel, and some products like that. So if these major products are actually not paying, or they have stopped producing certain activities, so that means most of our revenue which was coming from sales tax import would go out. Similar was the position with the customs. Again, it was the same products for which the sales tax of import was collected, because the sales tax on import is levied at the import side. Again, 5 or 6 products which are paying more than 70-80% of the total custom duty which has been collected. Federal excise duty primarily coming from the cigarettes, cement, and beverages, not more in terms of products. So overall, if you analyze the current structure, what we concluded was that it was exploitative, it was complex, there was excess withholding regime, and it all led to higher compliance costs. And it was not just about the federal cost, the taxes, there were provincial taxes and others. So there was a fragmented tax system and growth. And that all led to what we call as the low fiscal resource mobilization problem. So what we have recommended? We have recommended that the withholding tax regime should be simplified. The revenue non-spinners should be taken out of the system. Think like an economist. It's always the cost benefit. If the cost of collection is higher as compared to what we are getting as a benefit, we should not actually levy that, because that's not helping both the businesses or the ones which are collecting resources. The documentation needs to be improved. The tax filing has to be simply those who have to file should file, no categorization of filer or non-filer category. The system should be VAT based, and it should be simplified. And one last thing is that the tax exemptions has to be taken away. Since the time was limited, I have not gone into detail, but simply to orient you that when you make complex systems, then in order to protect, in order to benefit certain elites, you're also giving away lots of concessions and simplifications because the system cannot otherwise work. And that cost is also very high. And there are good systems as well. We are not saying that the FPR has done always bad. With the digitization, with the humanless processes such as VBOC, PSW, the faster system of refund, and the POS or the faceless customs assessment model is all what has actually been the hallmark of a good FBR system. PIDE did a very good report in terms of presenting evidence-based with numbers tax reforms, because often the FBR says that if we agree to what you're saying, then we would lose resources. We have proven that it's not the case. If you simplify, if you improve the overall taxation system, then we can still have more resources, but also receive higher economic growth as well. So this is what my take was initially. And now if you ask me, then I can basically keep on discussing further, or if there are any further questions, I would clarify. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very quick, and there's a lot of information, to grab and to, and it further led to multiple questions that I would be, requesting you to answer. If we have any quick 1 or 2 questions, we can take. Otherwise, we'll move to Dr. Ghulam Ghouse. Okay, any quick questions or comments?
Hand risen, I think.
Okay, I would like
sir, I have a few questions.
Okay.
My name is Imran Akram. There are few questions. Government is aiming towards increasing tax revenue every year, but this year we have a shortfall of about 1 trillion in FBR taxation.
Yeah.
Number one. Second is they are focusing. We have to increase tax to GDP ratio in Pakistan. How it is possible? If you are doing a progressive taxation system, in your presentation, there are very few retailers who want to go 5 million and above because of that progressive taxation. Unless you change your taxation to maybe flat taxation or regressive taxation, how it is possible to increase this thing? My third question is, your population is 25 million and there are taxpayers about 3 million. And about 60% of those who show their income less than 600,000, the minimum tax rate that is applicable for taxation. So how you can increase your base?
So I'll start with your last question, which is on the improvement of the base. We did a comparison with the Indian, Bangladeshi case and Sri Lanka. We converted the minimum taxable threshold in terms of dollar. And we found out that Pakistan is doing very good because nobody in the comparable region was charging the lowest percentile of the income with such a tax. If you calculate on a monthly basis, 600,000 means 50,000 rupees per month. So 50,000 rupees per month is not too much high in terms of the minimum wage of 35,000. So practically they are even not in the first percentile, maybe in the half of the percentile which we have targeted as a tax base. So practically speaking, the base from where the actual tax collection has to start should not be that much. What we propose that if you take a little high, we propose that it should be 800,000, then you would not lose enough of the tax revenue because it's very peanuts, but it would actually relieve the people in terms of doing the documentation and other. This is my first comment. The second comment is that everybody is paying taxes in Pakistan. It's not just the ones which are doing the filing. Everybody basically who's paying, the purchasing the mobile card, they're purchasing some other items in which the withholding taxes are embedded. The GST is paid by everyone. So saying that out of the total population of this much, there are only 3 million who are actually paying taxes wrong. Practically everybody is paying tax. Yes, we agree that the filing is small. And again, the reason for filing to be small is that the problem is with the tax return documentation. Why can't you have a simply pre-populated tax return, maybe of 1 page for those who have an income which is less than maybe 1.5 million per annum, not more than that. Why should they basically go through all this cumbersome process in terms of what is needed, what adjustments are needed, what types of credits are? They cannot do it. And simply, if you look at the education level or the literacy level, then practically it's not possible. So it's not about those who are filing, claiming that they are the ones which are paying tax. Everybody's paying tax. And the return filing is something different. And lastly, which you have commented in terms of the taxation targets, which has not been able to met, the prime reason was again that the assumption was that the large scale manufacturing is going to grow. But if you are not letting them grow, then the businesses cannot thrive. If you look at the custom side, you have said that the Chinese side would have a free trade agreement. That means no customs duty or tariffs. But at the same time, there is an additional custom duty of about 3%. Then there is a regulatory duty of 4%. So that makes it 7%. So everyone is paying at the customs as an import or for the raw material or the machinery which has been purchased. So practically, we have strangled the businesses to grow. And one reason for the low collection was also the improvement in inflation, which was not actually the target of the government to be that low. So the revenue collection has fallen because of these two reasons, the large scale manufacturing and the inflation. But again, even if this is natural, if the driver for the revenue has fallen, then we should be ready to have a smaller revenue base as well. Because the problem with our mindset is that we set targets on economic fundamentals, and once we have set the target, then we forget about that it's going to be the economic variables which are going to influence the economic returns in terms of taxes. If the inflation has gone down or the growth is not happening, then there would be no taxes. But the FBR is compelled to collect taxes even if the horse is not breathing, if it is not running. So that basically double the jeopardy of the taxation which we have to fear. So that is not a good policy.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Before we move on, and before even I started this session, so I was having a discussion with a very senior representative, and that person is on a very good post at FBR. Deliberately, I'm not sharing the name, but with his or her permission, I'm sharing some of the comments, which is going to give us a very much insights of what is really happening. So he or she says that whenever FBR has someone from the outside, I mean, when the chairman is someone like SZ or someone from a PAS service who do not know any field knowledge of taxation, the system gets hit badly and we perform badly. But whenever we have some chairman who is from our own department, we perform fairly well. So enough of stupid experiments with these institutions. Make wiser policies so that they can be effectively implemented, and most of all, ignite the economic process. Turn the economic wheel fast so that there is enough income generated to create more taxes. With slow or no economic growth, you will only suck the blood out of already limited business growth. The problem isn't FBR. It lies in your overall confused and misplaced economic policies. In fact, you don't have any economic policies at hand. Now, this is a very bold statement, and it's coming directly from somebody who is an FBR. So, would you like to comment on it? And then we will just move to Dr. Ghulam first.
No, I totally agree with the comments which has been made by the FBR person, because that's what the actual issue is about. That the FBR is a professional body, and it should be not just headed, but it should be inhabited with those who are professionals. He has said about the top person who is heading. I would even suggest that it should not be just the ones which are at the top. Even at the induction level, the persons have to be those who know what actually taxation is about, how it is conducted. Because once we have met the inductees, then we have found out that these are persons with background on medicine, background in terms of maybe social sciences and so many things. So we were failing to understand that can we like afford in a hospital that there is a doctor who is MA in Islamiyat, and we say that we are going to train them for about 6 months and they would be good doctors who can operate. We can't take that risk. So if you can't take that risk in terms of the hospitals, we have to think about that these are even riskier businesses or departments which we have to think about in terms of populating them with the relevant persons who are focused on their job and they're an expert. So I totally agree with this comment that the top leader should be someone who knows the processes, knows what are good and what's bad. But we have to think about not just the top, it has to be bottom up, or the system overall needs to work in tandem. It is not just about the top, because when we hear these comments, these are coming from senior lot of the FPR. For them, it is the problem of getting promoted or doing something which they want to. So what we recommend is that it should be a wholesome affair in which all the FBR needs to be revitalized.
So it is requested to